Welcome back. It's Niners Nightly. Hope everybody's having a great day. Happy February the 24th. We get out to Indianapolis for one of our favorites. Matt Barrows covers the 49ers and does it well for The Athletic. And he is in Indy, where the combine gets rolling Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe even Monday or Tuesday of next week. Maddie, how long does the combine last? Does it end Sunday? Does it go on till the middle of next week?
Feels like it goes on forever. I am not going to be here to the bitter end. John Lynch speaks on Wednesday. That's the main reason I'm here. But I'm interested in the defensive linemen and the offensive linemen, really. And then there are a few tight ends that I'm interested in watching as well. But I know that Larry Krueger likes to watch everyone, top to bottom, every position. Larry's out there for the punters, so I know that you're going to get into the weeds with some of the prospects.
Why don't we start with the story of the day, which is that the Niners extended Ben Bartch, 1-year deal. Is he their de facto starter at left guard, do you believe? Or is this an indication that Aaron Banks will be allowed to walk away in free agency? He's a local guy from El Cerrito. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say 100% and get aggregated because of that, but it does seem like that's not a position where they've spent a lot of money in free agency. I remember Laken Tomlinson a few years ago was coming off a couple of really good seasons, and they let him go via free agency. So it's going to depend on the market, but I do think that the 49ers think that there's a good chance that Aaron Banks leaves. And, Aaron Banks, I feel like he could play in a lot of different systems. He can play in a gap system. He's a big, strong guy. He's obviously played in the zone blocking system as well. So my point is that he might have a lot of suitors. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think that Ben Bartch is somebody that the 49ers are intrigued by. I think that they liked how he played at the end of the season when he was substituting for Aaron Banks. My thought is that it's going to be some sort of competition among Ben Bartch, Nick Zakelj, and then they usually sign some lower-priced veteran like a John Feliciano. It won't be John Feliciano because he announced recently that he's going to retire. But somebody in that vein, not going to cost you a mint. You sign him for a 1-year deal, and basically these more inexperienced guys, Bartch, Zakelj, have to be better than the veteran in order to win that left guard job.
There's always a surprise. It seems like the Niners always cook up a surprise. Any idea what it may be? I mean, I mention this because I'm looking at the odds for some of these free agents and where they're going to go. And the Niners have the third best odds of any team in football behind the Eagles and one other team for Zach Bond, the Eagles all-pro inside linebacker who they discovered this year from New Orleans. What do you think? Are the Niners going to – I mean, they went for Hargrave. A couple years ago, Mooney Ward. Do you expect that they may – I know a lot of the money's earmarked for Brock, but do they have a free agent splash in them? And if so, what do you guess it is?
Yeah, that would surprise me because they've got their own inside linebacker to take care of. So I don't think that they're going to spend a huge sum at that position. They've already got Fred Warner, one of the highest paid inside linebackers in the league. So that's sort of my reason that I'm skeptical that they'll be able to sign Trey Greenlaw. So it would surprise me if that's the position that they that's their big ticket position. The name that's been intriguing me for a while is Drew Dahlman. Because, there's a pedigree there. His dad played for the 49ers. He grew up in Salinas. He played at Stanford. They liked him coming out of the draft. He's what they like in centers, which is not an overly big guy, but he moves really well, and he's obviously a smart guy. And so That's been a position over the years where the 49ers have been willing to spend some money. I'm thinking of Weston Richburg one year and some other veterans that they brought in.
Alex Mack, yep.
Alex Mack, yeah, and then Ben Garland wasn't an expensive free agent, but he was a good fit as well. They have to move, and that's what Drew Dahlman does well. He's very light on his feet, and that's a priority for Kyle Shanahan. He wants to spend money on we just talked about guard. I don't think he wants to spend a lot of money at guard. He will spend money at center, and he will spend money at tackle. So that's always one that sort of catches my eye. And then I don't know what they're going to do with as far as Deebo Samuel's position if Samuel's allowed to leave. I think if everybody were healthy, they would be okay with who they have. But Brandon Ayuk is a big question mark for the beginning of the season. No one's quite sure if he's going to be 100% in early September. And even if he is practicing, is he going to be back to his usual self, or will it take a month, 2 months, maybe even half a season for Brandon Ayuk to be like Brandon Ayuk? So I do think that the 49ers have to have some answer, and it's probably a veteran, and it might be a well-known veteran, like, a Keenan Allen, who played at Cal.
Wow, that'd be a big name. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would be a real nice fit. Brandon Cooks has basically made a career of parachuting into one NFL city and doing pretty well. Not setting the world on fire, but certainly filling a role. Like if you wanted Brandon Cooks to be a productive wide receiver for 6 games while Brandon Ayuk is coming back, that would be something I think that Brandon Cooks would be very good at. So, and that's just 2 of the names that are out there. There's a ton more, and they're prominent names as well. Most of these guys are older on the back end of their career, but like I said, the 49ers aren't looking to sign somebody for 5 years. They're looking for somebody who can play a few choice snaps or a few choice games early in the season, and then give way to a healthy Brandon Ayuk.
Cooks is an interesting guy. I did an interview with him a number of years ago now when he was still relatively young coming out of Oregon State, and he told me that he grew up in Stockton, a Niner fan. So that would be kind of cool if he ultimately played for the Niners. I know he's floated around to a bunch of different teams, but he runs pretty well. He's a veteran, kind of a stopgap guy. He can still play, and he's got that. Hey, he grew up rooting for the team. What about Gus Bradley? You think Lynch will say anything about any specifics on Bradley's role with the team, or is he? Do you have any guess at what role he may man? I know Staley was the cornerback, kind of a cornerback coach. You think Bradley becomes the cornerback coach?
Yeah, my understanding is that Bradley's background is more with linebackers, but I guess Staley's was as well. I mean, I think that he'll get Staley's title, which is assistant head coach, which is usually makes a decent amount of money, and that's gone to ex-head coaches with the 49ers in the past. So Gus Bradley would fit into the Anthony Lynn, Brandon Staley role. The question I would have for Lynch, and probably a better one for Shanahan, is that at their end of the year press event, both of those guys talked about having a defense that isn't so one note, that if Nick Bosa got hurt for 3 games, you wouldn't be, running the same system that you would if he were in the lineup. You can do different things, which they didn't say the word blitz, but that's how everybody interpreted it, that this could be a team that does multiple things. And I would think if you're bringing in a good defensive mind like Gus Bradley, who knows this system, that's the difference between him and Staley. He taught Robert Saleh the defense, essentially. But those two are very, very tight, and they know this defense inside and out. And so they would be the best people to kind of work on some sort of blitz package that, maybe you don't even trot it out in week 1, but maybe it's something you use sparingly in the right moments, or if you do have a rash of injuries, it's something that you end up doing. So I wonder, and this is just me talking, whether that's sort of Gus Bradley's big project, big off-season project with Saleh, and what he really kind of specializes in, because that seems to be the directive from Kyle Shanahan.
There's, the draft is coming up, the combine's this week, so we'll get a much better idea, coming out of the combine, how these guys look and compare to one another. I'm all over the map as far as my thoughts on this thing, but I do think it's one of three positions for the 49ers. I either think they're going defensive tackle, and like a Mason Graham from Michigan, who's a tremendous player, but he may not test well this week, and that could drop him into the laps of the 49ers. There's also Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan, but I could see defensive tackle being, they love defensive tackle. They draft a lot of defensive tackles, it seems like. I could see that being a spot. I could see offensive tackle, maybe Josh Simmons, who suffered a patella tendon injury in October. But a lot of people think that if he hadn't suffered that injury, Matty, he might have been a top 5 pick. So maybe at 11, he's viewed as value. There's also Kelvin Banks, who only allowed one pressure, I believe, all year from Texas. I could see them going offensive tackle at 11. And the third position, I think, and I don't think it's likely, but the more I watch these guys, the more I say, oh, my God, they're both incredible. And that's wide receiver. And I know they drafted Pearsall. But you know what? Matt Millen drafted a bunch of receivers, and the last one was Megatron. So you know what? It's like, he could have said, oh, you know what? I drafted Charles Rogers and Mike Williams and all these guys, Roy Williams, and I'm not going receiver again. He would have passed on Megatron, who's only a Hall of Famer. Luther Burden from Missouri looks to me just like Debo, but maybe faster. And this McMillan character from Arizona is just... it's almost like he's got some of the greatest ball skills I think I've ever seen. It reminds me of Chris Carter, the way he attacks the football, and he's an incredible athlete. What do you think? I mean, that's how I'm breaking down 11. It's either Simmons or Banks if they go offensive tackle. It's Graham or Grant or maybe Nolan if they go defensive tackle. And I think they've got to take a long, hard look at Burden and McMillan if they fall into their lap. How do you see 11? How do you see that decision coming down?
Yeah, I agree with you most of the way there. And Kenneth Grant is somebody who's been growing on me as far as fit and what the 49ers need. Yeah, Walter Nolan is the slasher type. He's the Ole Miss defensive tackle who's really quick and it certainly is a type that the 49ers like. But Grant is the type that the 49ers really don't have, which is he does that, but he's also big enough to handle double teams, and he's good against the run. He's just a stout player, and I think that they were missing that. He's DJ Jones, basically. DJ Jones was a sixth-round pick way back when. This guy's going to be a first-round pick. Like you, I tend to vacillate among guys a lot. But I think that Kenneth Grant, and then you go back to the position later in the draft, and there are a lot of very quick guys. You should watch C.J. West from Indiana. He's not going to be picked very high because he doesn't have the body type. He's got short arms, doesn't have great height, doesn't have great length. But, boy, he gets off the snap really quickly, and he creates havoc in the backfield. My point is that you could pair a Grant with any number of other guys in the third, fourth, fifth round probably in this draft just because it's so deep at defensive tackle. I hear what you're saying about wide receiver, and I think Burden would be a great complement for Brandon Ayuk, just as Deebo Samuel has been. The guy that jumps out to me, though, is Tyler Warren from Penn State. He's a tight end.
Yeah.
And the rap on this draft is it's a good draft, but there are only a few elite players, like truly special players. And it doesn't really last much longer than the top 10. It might be like the top 7. And then you get the next tier which is a good tier, and it's a long tier. So there's a lot of players who are of the same quality, and that stretches, through round 3, say. But Warren might be the last of those truly special players. And if the 49ers got a chance to get him, I think it does so much for you. You're losing Debo. You might be losing Kyle Juszczyk. If not this year, then maybe in the near future. You're losing 2 of your versatile weapons, your chess pieces that Kyle Shanahan values so much, the run/pass guys. And you wouldn't be replacing them per se with a Tyler Warren, but you'd be replacing that ability. Are the 49ers going to run on this play, or are the 49ers going to pass on this play? That's essentially what the 49ers are. And so you would have 2 tight ends in Kittle and Tyler Warren that can do that. And everybody knows Warren's, gaudy stats from last season with Penn State. He can also block. He's a big guy. So I feel like he could take some of the inline snaps from George Kittle and maybe elongate Kittle's career. And maybe if Kittle, is playing 14, 15 games a year right now, you get 16, 17 out of him if there's another tight end taking some of those. I'm not saying he should replace Kittle by any means, but it would allow Kittle to do more Travis Kelce things. And Kelsey's playing, into his mid to late 30s. And Kelsey's able to do that because he's basically a big slot receiver who doesn't have to block very much. I just think that it would help. I think it would elongate Kittle's career and make him more available during the season as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great name. Tyler Warren's terrific. It's funny. Maddie's article that's out now, everybody, if you check it out on The Athletic, he did an incredible piece on who's the perfect player at every position for the Niners. And what I loved about it wasn't necessarily the names, because we all can debate the names, but it was the traits. And as a guy who's covered Kyle Shanahan for years and years, you are almost a perfect person to discuss kind of the traits that they like at each position. And you just mentioned tight end. What traits did you have at tight end? Because I'll say this, I think the one trait that I would throw for Niner tight ends, I think you got to be a two-way guy, and I think you got to be a smart guy. And I was going maybe Jackson Hawes, who started at Yale, transferred to Georgia Tech, as maybe a smart guy who can catch and block. I look at intelligence as the key factor for a Shanahan tight end. What do you view it as?
Yeah, that the two-way ability. I mean, everybody would love a two-way tight end. They're so rare these days, and that's why Tyler Warren stands out. But that's what Kittle does. Kittle can score an 85-yard touchdown on one play, and block the Eagles' edge rusher on the next play. And there are very few guys that can do that. But this is a very good draft for tight ends. So no one does it quite as well as Warren does. But Gunnar Helm, for example, from Texas, jumps out to me.
Yeah.
Because he played in line quite a bit at Texas, and he also had almost 800 receiving yards for Texas this last year. He's not elite speed or anything like that, but more than serviceable at both blocking and pass catching. I like Terrence Ferguson from Oregon too. I think he might be even a little bit bigger than Gunnar Helm. I think he's probably not as good a blocker right now as he will be eventually, but he can do it as well. And then the NFL guys that I talked to all really like Jason Taylor's son at LSU.
Mason Taylor.
Mason Taylor. And he does a little bit of everything as well. That's the 49ers were hoping to get something like that with Cameron Latu a couple of years ago in the third round. Obviously, it did not work out. But the reason why he was their guy, and that was another deep draft at tight end, is because he could block. He was a strong, strong guy who was hard to move, and he also was able to catch passes and touchdowns at Alabama. So that's who they're looking for, and I think the blocking is paramount. And sometimes it's more of a move guy. Braden Willis, a seventh rounder that same year. Charlie Warner, I forget what round Warner was. Might have been sixth round.
Yeah, I think six is right.
From Georgia a few years before that. He was more of an H-back type. He served as the number 2 tight end. So, I mean, if they have to pick between the two types, the big slot and the guy who can block, they're going to pick the guy who can block.
No question. Some of these are right on too. As for corner, I totally agree with you. The Niners want a feisty guy, and that's what Demo Lenore is. And you pick Kobe Bryant. If people say I know that name, yeah, well, this is Cobee Bryant, Kobe, but his nickname's the Mamba. From Kansas, and he was an incredible player. He's very skinny, but man, he's feisty. That was a great one. You went with Jeffrey Bassa, the linebacker from Oregon, and I agree with that too. Kind of an undersized guy, but run and hit. That's a big trait they love. What are they looking for in a D tackle and a D end? You have Walter Nolan, which I think is a perfect fit for the Niners, and you have JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. What are they looking for in a defensive tackle? What are they looking for in a defensive end?
Well, I mean, this is the Chris Kasurik. This is the wide 9 defensive line. They want guys who are explosive, who get off the snap really quickly, and they love that at defensive tackle. And that's something, to his credit, that Malik Collins can do. And that's why, Kenneth Grant probably isn't going to test as well as some of these other guys, but he's also, 325 pounds. But he still moves well. And so this draft is just full of those guys. Darius Alexander from Toledo is another guy. There's a defensive tackle from South Carolina. I can't pull up his name.
TJ Sanders.
Yes, TJ Sanders. Straight out of, the 49ers mold for that position. I mentioned C.J. West, J.J. Pegues from Ole Miss, who also plays running back.
He's a short yardage guy.
Yeah, he'd be a great short yardage guy. You get to see Kyle Shanahan following. Kyle Shanahan only likes the offensive guys, but you could see Kyle Shanahan loving this defensive tackle for what he would bring to the goal line. The list goes on and on. There are a lot of players that will fit their mold there. That's why I wonder if they don't go defensive tackle in the first round, they would go for a different position, knowing that they could get a really good defensive tackle. Certainly, maybe not a year one starter, but an eventual starter and a contributor this year. So that's what they like there. The other position, defensive end, is interesting because they've taken, a couple of types of guys. Obviously, Nick Bosa is the sort of George Kittle of defensive ends in that he plays the run and the pass equally well. He's a 3-down guy. So, I mean, I think that they would love that. I don't know if you've watched Michael Williams from Georgia. He has the size and the length. He probably is going to be there at number 11. It would not surprise me if he's the first-round pick. But both of the Ohio State guys, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who I put into that story, are both, big-bodied guys who got sacks and played the run really well. They were both trained by Larry Johnson. He's the defensive line coach with the Buckeyes. Both Bosa brothers, think the world of him. They would be very, very quick studies with the 49ers. Big debate in Indianapolis about which one of those two guys gets picked first. And they both really came on strong in the playoffs this last year. But they're relatively the same size. I like JT Tuimoloau a little bit better. He just seems more athletic. I think there's more upside
Sawyer's
there with
stiff.
him.
Sawyer's a little
Yeah,
stiff.
he's a little stiff. He's a little stiff.
Yeah.
Sawyer's floor might be higher. The other one's ceiling is probably higher. So that's why I went with him. But boy, I think Nick Bosa would love either of those guys opposite him.
I would encourage all 49er fans to go order The Athletic, read Maddie's piece, not necessarily for the names, because the names are great, but it's really for these kind of little insights into Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's preferences that came out in this article that you don't know if you don't cover this team for years and years like you have. And it's really, really well done. So we'll let you go, man, and get on with your night. I know it's a little bit later on the East Coast, so have a great night. Enjoy the week in Indy, and we'll be reading you in The Athletic, looking for all kinds of insights. And thanks for jumping on KBR and sharing some of your knowledge with us.
No problem, Larry. Thank you for having me on.